As the last Xaurith vessel was obliterated, the battlefield fell silent. The once mighty biofleet was now nothing more than drifting wreckage, twisted, burned, and lifeless. Humanity had done what no other species had dared to do. They had not just defeated the Xaurith, they had eradicated them. On the bridge of the Revenant, Admiral Bishop stood motionless, staring at the scattered remains of the enemy. His crew exchanged quiet glances, unsure of what to say. There was no celebration, no cheers of victory, only the cold realization of what had just happened. General Adrian Cole's voice crackled over the comms. "Admiral, the battlefield is secured. What are your orders?" Bishop didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to his comms officer. "Status report." Lieutenant Hayes scanned the data. "Enemy forces are completely wiped out. No survivors detected. Our fleet sustained moderate losses, but nothing catastrophic." Bishop nodded slowly. A victory, but a costly one. Then a new transmission appeared on the main display. It was coming from the original species that had called for help, the small, fragile beings who had unknowingly unleashed humanity's fury. A trembling alien, with pale skin and wide, fearful eyes, appeared on the screen. His voice shook as he spoke. "Humans, you have saved us, but at what cost?" Bishop's expression didn't change. "Your people will live. That's what matters." The alien swallowed hard. "Yes, but the way you fight, the way you destroy them, we have never seen such power. The Xaurith were feared across the stars, but you..." He hesitated. "You're something else." Bishop's gaze was unreadable. "The Xaurith made a mistake. They thought we were like the others. Weak. Afraid." He took a slow step forward. "Now the galaxy knows the truth. Humanity is not prey. We are the storm." The alien shivered. The message was clear. The Xaurith had been the terror of the galaxy, until now. A new terror had taken their place. Across the battlefield, the Black Armada regrouped. Ships moved in formation, recovering the wounded and salvaging what little remained. In the darkness of space, the wreckage of the Xaurith fleet floated like a graveyard, a silent warning to anyone who might think to challenge Earth. Humanity had answered the call for help. And now, the galaxy would never forget what they had unleashed. The sky above Varys III burned with fire as explosions echoed through the once peaceful cities. The people of the planet, the Zorvans, ran in terror, their frail bodies unable to fight back against the invaders. The Corvians, a brutal and merciless race, had come to claim the planet as their own. Their warships hovered above, blocking out the sun, while their ground forces spread through the streets like a disease, cutting down anything in their path. High in the central tower of the Zorvan capital, Elder Jorak watched in horror. He had sent distress signals to the Galactic Council, begging for help. The Council, made up of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, had promised peace and protection. But now, in their moment of greatest need, there was only silence. No fleets, no soldiers, just the cold indifference of a galaxy that had abandoned them. Jorak turned to his assistant, a younger Zorvan named Laren, whose hands trembled as she tried to send yet another message. "Try again," Jorak said, his voice shaking. "Someone must hear us." Laren pressed the controls, sending out one final desperate transmission. "This is Varys III. We are under attack by the Xorvians. Our defenses have fallen. We beg for aid. Please, someone, anyone, help us." The message traveled through the void, bouncing from one relay station to another, but there was no reply. The Galactic Council had made its decision. Varys III was not worth saving. A massive explosion rocked the tower, shaking the very foundations of the building. Jorak stumbled, gripping the edge of a console. He looked out the window and saw the central defense complex go up in flames. The last of their planetary weapons were gone. The battle was over before it had even begun. Jorak closed his eyes, despair filling his heart. "This is the end," he whispered. Our people will be nothing but dust in the wind. But then, something unexpected happened. The console in front of Lirin blinked. A new message had arrived. Her eyes widened as she read it. Someone responded. She gasped. Jorik rushed forward, staring at the screen. The message was simple. Hold on. We are coming. There was no identification, no official seal, nothing to indicate which civilization had sent it. Just those 5 words. Lirin's hands trembled as she read it aloud. Who is coming? Before Jorik could answer, the sky above shifted. The Xorvian warships, which had been firing relentlessly at the surface, suddenly stopped. A deep hum filled the air, a sound that sent shivers down Jorik's spine. The Xorvian fleet had detected something, a new presence in the system. Far beyond Varus III, beyond the shattered remains of its orbital defenses, space itself seemed to bend and twist. Then, with a flash of light, they arrived. Dark, hulking warships emerged from hyperspace, their metal hulls scarred from countless battles. They were not sleek like the ships of the Galactic Council, nor did they shine with the advanced technology of the core worlds. These ships were built for war, for survival, for destruction. The Xorvian commander, watching from the bridge of his dreadnought, narrowed his reptilian eyes. He knew these ships. The rumors had spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Only one species built war machines like these. Humans, the Deathworlders. A voice echoed across all channels, cold and sharp like a blade. Xorvian fleet, this is Admiral Ethan Drake of the Black Sun Fleet. You have invaded an unarmed colony and slaughtered innocent civilians. You have one chance to surrender. Leave now, or be destroyed. Jorik felt his breath catch in his throat. Humans. The name alone sent fear through most of the galaxy. They came from a world so harsh, so deadly, that survival had shaped them into warriors unlike any other species. Where others built their empires on diplomacy and trade, humans had forged theirs through fire and blood. The Xorvian commander sneered. Foolish Deathworlders, he spat. You think your tiny fleet can stop us? We outnumber you 5-1. Admiral Drake's voice remained calm. Wrong answer. The human warships moved like predators, their engines roaring as they accelerated toward the Xorvian fleet. The battle had begun. The Xorvian commander, General Krixar, stood at the bridge of his dreadnought, his reptilian tail flicking in irritation. His blood-red eyes narrowed as he watched the human fleet advance. The Deathworlders had responded faster than he expected, but it didn't matter. Krixar grinned, exposing his jagged teeth. They have made a mistake, he growled. They are few. We are many. Around him, Xorvian officers hissed in agreement. The Xorvian fleet outnumbered the humans 5-1. Their dreadnoughts were armed with the most advanced plasma cannons, and their hulls were thick with layered defenses. They had crushed dozens of weaker species before. Humans would be no different. Target their lead battleship, Krixar ordered. Fire everything. The Xorvian fleet opened fire, plasma bolts streaking across the void. Explosions flared as human shields absorbed the impact. But the Deathworlders did not slow down. They did not evade. They did not run. Instead, they charged. On the bridge of the human flagship Valkyrie, Admiral Ethan Drake stood with his arms crossed. His expression remained cold and unreadable. He watched as enemy fire rained down on his ships. The shields flickered but held strong. Enemy fleet engaging, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Carter. Drake nodded. Good. To an untrained eye, it seemed reckless, insane even. No sane commander would charge straight into superior numbers. But the Xorvians didn't understand humans. They didn't understand what it meant to be forged on a death world. Drake raised his hand. All ships, execute hammer formation. The human fleet split into 3 attack groups. 2 smaller groups broke away to the sides, while the main force plowed straight ahead at full speed. The Xorvian ships continued their bombardment, but they had made a fatal mistake. They assumed the humans would fight like everyone else. But humans didn't play fair. "Launch the swarms," Drake ordered. From hidden launch bays, thousands of small hunter drones shot forward, weaving through enemy fire with terrifying speed. Each drone was armed with armor-piercing payloads, designed to bypass shields and tear through enemy hulls. The Corvians were unprepared. Their ships were built for brute force battles, not for fighting a swarm. Explosions erupted across the Xorvian ranks as the drones found their targets. Small cracks formed in their defenses. And then the real attack began. Drake's main battleships fired their kinetic railguns, unleashing slugs the size of trucks at near-light speed. Unlike plasma weapons, which could be absorbed by shields, kinetic rounds tore through everything. A single shot from the Valkyrie slammed into a Xorvian cruiser. The shield held for a fraction of a second, then collapsed. The slug ripped through the ship like it was made of paper, punching straight through the bridge. The cruiser detonated in a massive fireball. One down. More followed. Xorvian warships, once so confident in their overwhelming numbers, crumbled under the relentless human assault. Their dreadnoughts, built for long-range bombardment, were being hunted down at close range. Panic spread through the Xorvian ranks. On the bridge of his flagship, General Krixar's confidence began to crack. His claws dug into the metal railing as he watched his fleet fall apart. "This is impossible," he hissed. "Sir, they are overwhelming our defenses," one of his officers cried. Krixar bared his teeth. "Enough of this. Send in the Titan-class warships. Crush them." From behind the Xorvian battle lines, 3 massive ships emerged, each nearly twice the size of a human dreadnought. These were the Titan-class warships, the pride of the Xorvian Empire. Their heavy armor could withstand planetary bombardments, and their weapons could turn moons into dust. Krixar leaned forward, his confidence returning. "Let's see how the Deathworlders handle this." On the Valkyrie, Lieutenant Carter's eyes widened. "Sir, we have 3 Titan-class warships incoming." Drake stared at the screen, watching the behemoths advance. He could almost hear the Xorvian general's smug laughter from across space. A lesser commander might have hesitated, might have feared what was coming. Drake? He just smirked. "Perfect," he said. "Now the real battle begins." The battlefield was a storm of fire and destruction. Wreckage from fallen ships floated lifelessly, drifting through the chaos of space. The Xorvian fleet, once confident in their overwhelming numbers, was now struggling to hold formation. But then, the Titan-class warships arrived. The 3 massive Xorvian battleships pushed forward, their thick armor reflecting the distant explosions. They were fortresses in space, each one built to withstand entire planetary assaults. Their heavy plasma cannons glowed with power, preparing to unleash destruction upon the human fleet. On the Valkyrie's bridge, Admiral Ethan Drake studied the enemy warships with sharp, calculating eyes. These weren't just any ships. They were city-sized juggernauts, the pride of the Xorvian Empire. His crew waited for his command, tension thick in the air. Lieutenant Carter broke the silence. "Sir, the Titan-class ships are charging their main weapons." Drake nodded, completely unfazed. "Let them fire," he said. The Xorvian warships unleashed their fury. Gigantic plasma beams surged forward, carving through space like glowing spears. Any normal fleet would have been annihilated on the spot. But the humans were ready. "Execute phase shift maneuver," Drake ordered. In an instant, the human fleet scattered. The smaller, more agile human ships twisted and spun in precise, calculated movements. Plasma beams barely missed them, scorching empty space where they had been moments before. Even the larger battleships activated their gravitic thrusters, making last-second adjustments to dodge incoming fire. The Corvians were used to fighting slower, weaker enemies. They had never fought humans before. Admiral Drake watched the massive plasma beams fade into the distance, harmless. Then he gave the order. "Return fire." The Valkyrie roared to life. Its railguns fired, sending kinetic slugs hurtling toward the enemy at near-light speed. These weren't energy weapons. They weren't meant to be absorbed by shields. They were unstoppable. The first Titan-class warship took a direct hit. The slug pierced its armor, tearing through decks and corridors before exiting through the other side. Explosions rippled across the ship as internal systems ruptured under the shockwave. A second slug followed, smashing into the ship's core. The Titan-class warship shuddered, then detonated in a fireball brighter than a sun. The Xorvian fleet panicked. Even General Krixar, watching from his flagship, froze in shock. One of his greatest warships had just been erased from existence in seconds. How? How is that possible? Krixar growled, his claws gripping the armrests of his command chair. Another Titan-class warship tried to maneuver out of the line of fire, but it was too late. The human fleet had already surrounded it. The Valkyrie and 2 other battleships unleashed hell, firing high-speed railgun slugs into its engines. Internal explosions erupted as power conduits shattered. The Titan-class warship lost control, drifting helplessly toward a nearby Xorvian cruiser. Then it collided. The force of the impact crushed the smaller Xorvian ship like a tin can. A moment later, a chain reaction of explosions tore through both vessels, leaving only debris in their place. General Krixar's rage turned to desperation. This is impossible, he roared. Only one Titan-class warship remained. It turned to retreat, its engines burning at full power. But humans weren't forgiving. Admiral Drake's voice was cold. Valkyrie, fire the Novolance. A section of the Valkyrie's hull slid open, revealing a massive, experimental weapon, one that had never been used in battle before. It powered up, glowing with a deep, ominous light. Then it fired. A searing beam of energy shot forward, moving faster than anything the Xorgians had ever seen. It sliced through the last Titan-class warship like a knife through paper, cutting the ship in half. Both halves detonated in a brilliant explosion. Silence followed. The Xorvian fleet, once numbering in the hundreds, was now a graveyard of shattered warships and burning wreckage. On the Valkyrie, Admiral Drake exhaled slowly. His crew watched the debris field in awe. Lieutenant Carter turned to him. "Sir, the Xorvian fleet is finished." Drake nodded. "Not yet." He turned his gaze toward the last remaining enemy, General Krixar's flagship. A single transmission was sent across the battlefield. Drake's voice was calm, cold, and final. "Surrender." Krixar's blood ran cold. The Xorvian flagship, the Dreadfang, was the last warship standing. Its once imposing hull, black as the void, was now scared and battered. Smoke and fire poured from ruptured decks, and flickering emergency lights cast eerie shadows inside the bridge. General Krixar sat frozen in his command chair, his claws digging into the armrests. He had just watched his fleet, the mighty armada of the Xorvian Empire, annihilated by a force he had underestimated. And now, the humans were coming for him. The transmission from Admiral Drake echoed in the silent bridge. "Surrender." Krixar's officers looked at him, awaiting his command. Fear flickered in their eyes, an emotion they had never associated with humans before today. The Dreadfang's sensors screamed warnings. The Valkyrie, the massive human battleship that had slaughtered his fleet, was moving into position. Around it, dozens of human warships formed a tight formation, their weapons aimed directly at his ship. There was no escape. But Krixar was not a coward. His reptilian lips curled into a snarl. "Never," he growled. "I will never bow to humans." His clawed hand slammed the emergency command console. "Prepare all remaining weapons," he barked. "Charge the plasma cannons. Fire everything." The crew hesitated for only a moment. Then, with shaking hands, they obeyed. The Dreadfang's last weapons came to life. Torpedo tubes opened. Plasma cannons whined as they powered up. Missile bays readied for launch. The final battle was about to begin. But the humans were already prepared. On the Valkyrie's bridge, Admiral Drake stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He watched as the last desperate attack from the Dreadfang unfolded. Lieutenant Carter's voice was calm. "Sir, the Xorvian flagship is preparing to fire." Drake nodded. "Let them." A second later, the Dreadfang unleashed its fury. A barrage of plasma blasts, torpedoes, and missiles tore through space, rushing toward the human fleet like a storm of fire and death. But the humans didn't flinch. "Activate Aegis Protocol," Drake ordered. In an instant, the Valkyrie and its fleet executed a flawless countermeasure. Point defense turrets came to life, tracking the incoming missiles with precision beyond anything the Xorvians had ever seen. One by one, the missiles were obliterated before they even got close. Torpedoes exploded prematurely, caught in energy disruption fields generated by human ships. And the plasma blasts. They were met with the human fleet's kinetic shielding, dispersing into harmless streaks of light. Not a single shot reached its target. The Dreadfang's final attack had failed. Silence fell over the bridge once again. The crew of the Dreadfang stared in horror. Their greatest weapons had just been shrugged off like they were nothing. Admiral Drake exhaled slowly, as if he had expected this. Then, with absolute authority, he gave his final order. "Fire." The human fleet answered with merciless precision. Railguns roared, launching hypervelocity slugs that ripped through the Dreadfang's armor like paper. Energy lances pierced the ship's engines, causing massive internal explosions. Missiles struck the command tower, reducing entire sections of the ship to debris and flames. General Crixer felt the impact shake the bridge. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Panels exploded, sending his crew screaming as they were thrown from their stations. Crixer stumbled, grabbing onto his chair for support. His vision swam. The Dreadfang was dying. Smoke filled the bridge. Fires raged in the corridors. Warning alarms screamed through the ship. The mighty flagship of the Xorvian Empire, the symbol of their power, was falling apart. Crixer's vision blurred as he looked at the cracked view screen. There, in the middle of the battlefield, stood the Valkyrie, untouched, immovable, like a god of war. Crixer's claws loosened. For the first time in his life, he felt defeat. He collapsed into his chair, his breathing ragged. The transmission came again. Admiral Drake's voice, calm, controlled, and absolute. "This is your last chance. Surrender, or be destroyed." Crixer's heart pounded. The Dreadfang could not take another volley. One more attack, and it would be reduced to dust. He had one choice left. His claws trembled as he reached for the communication controls. And then, he made his decision. The Dreadfang was dying. The once mighty Xorvian flagship, the pride of the Empire, had been reduced to a crippled wreck. Fires raged across its shattered hull. Explosions burst from its decks, sending debris spiraling into space. General Crixar watched in silence, his claws trembling as the Valkyrie, the human warship that had annihilated his fleet, loomed before him. The final transmission had come through minutes ago. Surrender, or be destroyed. A choice that was no longer his to make. The Dreadfang's engines were dead, its weapons useless, its defenses shattered. And the humans, they hadn't even broken a sweat. Crixar gritted his teeth. To surrender was humiliation. It was to admit that the Xorvian Empire, the greatest force in the galaxy, had fallen before humans, before mere flesh and bone. But to refuse meant death. His crew stared at him, waiting, desperate. Many were wounded. Others barely clung to consciousness. The fires flickered in their eyes, reflecting the doom that awaited them. "K. General." A trembling voice broke the silence. Crixar turned. His second in command, a young officer named Salric, stood at attention, blood dripping from a wound on his forehead. "The crew, they await your orders." Crixar's claws dug into his armrest. His legacy as a warrior, as a leader, this was what it had come to. Begging for mercy from humans. But then he saw the fear in Salric's eyes. The same fear echoed in every face around him. He had spent his life leading warriors into battle, demanding their loyalty, their sacrifice. Was he really going to throw their lives away just because his pride wouldn't let him surrender? The ship shook violently. Another explosion erupted below decks. The Dreadfang was seconds away from total collapse. And then, Crixar exhaled. With slow, deliberate movements, he reached for the communication panel. The bridge crew watched in silence. A moment later, his voice echoed through space. "This is General Crixar of the Xorvian Empire." He closed his eyes. The next words felt like poison on his tongue. "We surrender." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the human fleet responded. The Valkyries' weapons powered down. The other human warships lowered their targeting systems. A single message came through. Admiral Drake's voice, firm but calm. "Stand by for boarding. Any resistance will not be tolerated." The Xorvian crew sagged in relief. Some slumped to the ground, exhaustion overtaking them. Others simply stared at the screens, shocked that they were still alive. Crixar simply sat there. For the first time in his life, he had lost a war. But deep in his heart, a darker realization settled in. The Xorvian Empire had ruled the galaxy for centuries. They had conquered, enslaved, and crushed any species that opposed them. But humans? Humans were something else. They weren't just warriors. They weren't just another empire in the making. They were Deathworlders. And if today had proven anything, it was that the galaxy had underestimated them. And that was a mistake they would never recover from. The boarding pods hit the hull of the Dreadfang like bolts of lightning, piercing through its shattered armor and locking into place. Moments later, hatches blew open and human marines poured inside, moving with precision and purpose. The Xorvian crew, those who still had the strength to stand, watched in fear. They had heard the stories, how Deathworlders fought like demons, how they showed no mercy in battle. But these Marines weren't here to slaughter the helpless. They were here to take control. At the head of the boarding party was Captain Ava Torres, her armor dark and imposing, her helmet visor glowing with tactical data. She moved through the corridors with practiced ease, her squad covering every corner, every shadow. "Clear this sector," she ordered. "Secure the command bridge." The Xorvian soldiers who had once fought with savage pride now lowered their weapons, surrendering without a fight. The human Marines took their weapons, bound their claws, and moved them to secure zones. Captain Torres arrived at the bridge. The doors, once sealed tight with layers of reinforced metal, had been blasted open by the boarding charges. Inside, smoke hung in the air, the smell of burnt circuits and scorched metal thick and choking. General Crixar sat slumped in his command chair, his eyes hollow, his shoulders hunched. The mighty warlord was now nothing more than a defeated soldier. Torres stepped forward, her voice amplified by her suit. "General Crixar, by order of the United Terran Fleet, you are now a prisoner of war. Any resistance will be met with force." Crixar's red eyes met hers. For a moment, there was a flash of the old fire, the old defiance. But then it faded. He nodded slowly, his claws opening in a gesture of surrender. "You fight well, human," he rasped. "Better than I expected." Torres didn't flinch. "And you underestimated us. That was your mistake." As her team secured the bridge, Torres activated her comms. "Bridge secure. General Crixar in custody. All systems under our control." Back on the Valkyrie, Admiral Drake received the report. He nodded, a grim satisfaction settling over him. The battle was over. The Xorvian threat, at least for now, had been neutralized. "Prepare for a full sweep of the ship," he ordered. "We're taking everything. Data, weapons, tech. I want to know what else they're hiding." As the human fleet moved to consolidate their victory, the transmission lines buzzed with new messages. The Galactic Council had finally decided to respond. A hologram flickered to life on the Valkyrie's bridge, revealing the image of Counselor Ralvik, a pale, slender alien with sharp eyes and a voice smooth as silk. "Admiral Drake," Ralvik began, "we have been monitoring the situation. Your intervention, while unexpected, has prevented a great disaster. The Council acknowledges your success." Drake's eyes narrowed. "Acknowledges? While you sat by and did nothing, we fought and bled to save Varys 3. Don't patronize me, Counselor." Ralvik's expression tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "The Council must act with care. Political considerations." "Politics didn't save Varys 3. Drake interrupted. "We did. Humanity did. Remember that." Ralvik's hologram flickered. "The Council will discuss this. We will be in touch." The transmission cut out. Lieutenant Carter turned to Drake, a smirk on his face. "Looks like we ruffled some feathers." Drake allowed himself a small, rare smile. "Good. Let them be uncomfortable. It's time they realized that Earth isn't their pawn." Meanwhile, on Varys 3, the Zorvan people emerged from their shelters. They looked to the sky, where the human fleet still orbited, and whispered prayers of thanks. They had been saved not by the galactic powers they had trusted, but by those they had once feared. In the following hours, the Black Sun fleet coordinated relief efforts. Supplies were sent down, medical teams helped the wounded, and engineers assisted in rebuilding critical infrastructure. The Zorvans were hesitant at first, their fear of humans hard to shake. But as they saw the genuine aid, the real compassion, their hearts softened. One Zorvan elder, his eyes wary but wise, stood before a human medic and bowed deeply. "We owe you our lives, our future. How can we repay you?" The medic, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled gently. "Just remember that not all monsters come from Deathworlds, and not all heroes wear shining armor." In the aftermath of the battle, a new understanding was forged. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as news spread of how the Deathworlders, the terrifying humans, had done what the mighty Galactic Council could not. And on the bridge of the Valkyrie, Admiral Drake looked out at the stars, knowing that this was only the beginning. Humanity had shown its strength. Now it would show its resolve. The Corvians had underestimated them. The Council had doubted them. But Earth would not be ignored. Not now. Not ever. The battle was over. The once mighty Dreadfang now drifted in space, crippled and under Terran control. On the surface of Varys 3, the Zorvan people slowly emerged from the ruins of their cities, gazing up at the human fleet that had come as saviors. But for Admiral Drake, the war was not finished. Standing on the bridge of the Valkyrie, he stared at the holographic display of the battlefield. His eyes locked onto the captured Sorvian flagship. "What's the status of the Dreadfang?" he asked. Lieutenant Carter checked his readings. "Our engineers have full control. The ship's weapons are disabled, and its AI is locked down. The Sorvian crew is secure. And General Crixer, in the brig. He hasn't spoken a word since his capture." Drake exhaled slowly. "That's about to change." With heavy steps, he made his way down to the brig, passing rows of secured Sorvian prisoners. Some glared at him with hate. Others kept their heads down in shame. At the far end of the brig, Crixer sat on a reinforced bench, his claws resting on his knees. His red eyes flicked up as Drake approached. "You fought well," Drake said simply. Crixer let out a dry chuckle. "Not well enough." Drake studied him for a moment before speaking. "You knew this war was lost before it even began, didn't you?" Crixer bared his fangs, a flicker of defiance returning. "We were warriors long before your kind reached the stars. The Sorvian Empire never retreats, never surrenders. And yet, here you are," Drake said, his voice calm but firm. "The empire you fought for left you to die. The Galactic Council ignored your pleas for help, but humanity, we acted. We changed the outcome." Crixer was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Yes, you did." A deep breath filled his lungs before he spoke again. "There will be consequences, Admiral. The Council will not like that you interfered. They will fear you now. Fear humanity. Drake smirked. Good. Let them. On the surface of Varys 3, celebrations erupted. The Zorvan people gathered in their city squares, singing, embracing, and thanking the humans who had saved them. The Black Sun Fleet had deployed medical teams, engineers, and food supplies, showing the galaxy that Deathworlders weren't just warriors. They were builders, protectors. An old Zorvan elder, his voice heavy with emotion, addressed a human officer. You could have left us to die. Why did you come? The officer smiled. Because we don't abandon those in need. That's what makes us human. As the fleet prepared to leave, a final message came from the Galactic Council. A hologram flickered to life on the Valkyrie's bridge, showing the familiar face of Counselor Ralvik. Admiral Drake, he said, his voice carefully controlled. The Council has reviewed the situation. Drake crossed his arms. And Ralvik hesitated. Officially, we cannot condone your actions. But, he exhaled, even the Council cannot deny what you've done. The Zorvans owe you their survival. The galaxy has seen your strength. Drake leaned forward. We didn't do this for the Council's approval. Ralvik gave a tired nod. Regardless, be prepared. Your actions have changed the balance of power. There will be those who see you as heroes. Others will see you as a threat. Drake smirked. Then they'd better be ready for what comes next. The transmission ended. As the Valkyrie and the human fleet turned away from Varys 3, heading back into the vastness of space, one thing was certain. Humanity was no longer a silent player in galactic affairs. They had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The end.